My father left me the family home before he died, but my mother moved in her boyfriend and his family, and left them all homeless without regret. I'm 23 years old, just finished college a few months ago, and I'm basically about to kick my mom out of the house I inherited from my dad. I know how it sounds. Believe me, my whole family has made it very clear to me. But the thing is way more complicated than it seems, and I need to tell it because honestly, I can't take the guilt that everyone's trying to put in my head anymore. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was 15 and my dad died, it was cancer, one of those that moves fast. Like in 6 months, we went from we need to run some tests to planning the funeral, and I still haven't fully processed that he left just like that. You know, one day he was there, and the next he just wasn't. My dad, Samuel, was a good man, hard-working, one of those who kills himself at the office so the family doesn't lack anything. He and my mom never officially got married, something that honestly never seemed important to me until he died, and it turns out legally it mattered quite a bit. We lived well, had a big house in a quiet neighborhood. My dad had 2 other properties he rented out, and I always thought that's how we'd continue when he was gone. What I didn't know was that my dad had left everything perfectly organized in a will that basically said I inherited absolutely everything. The house where we lived, the other 2 properties, his savings, his investment accounts, everything. My mom didn't get anything because legally they weren't spouses, and my dad was very clear in his documents that everything was for me. At that moment, I didn't understand why he had done that. I mean, obviously, my mom was going to keep living in the house with me. We were family, right? But looking back, I think my dad knew something I didn't. Something about my mom that I was too young to see. The first few months after he died were weird. My mom was sad but not devastated either, you know what I mean? Like she cried at the funeral and all that, but by like 3 weeks later she was pretty normal, going out with friends, getting dressed up more than usual. And I thought, well, everyone processes grief differently. Maybe she needs to distract herself. I was drowning in my own sadness, trying to finish high school while processing that my dad wasn't going to be there for any of the important things in my life, and my mom seemed more worried about redecorating the living room than anything else. Then, like 5 months after Dad died, she told me she had met someone. 5 months. I don't know if that's fast or normal, but to me it seemed incredibly fast. Like my dad hadn't even been dead half a year, and she was already introducing me to Phillip. Phillip was like 45 years old, worked in some construction or property management thing, something like that. And from the first moment, I didn't like him. Not because he was necessarily a bad person, but because he arrived acting like he was already the owner of the house, like making comments about how we could improve this or change that. And I was thinking, bro, this is my house technically. My dad left it to me. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make my mom feel bad, and because honestly, at 16, I didn't know how to handle that situation. Phillip had 2 kids, Ethan, who was like 18, and Lauren, who was 19, and sometimes he'd bring them over so we could meet the family as if we were already a happy blended family or something. Lauren was fine. We didn't talk much, but she wasn't problematic either. Ethan was kind of intense, always trying to act like he was my older brother or something, giving me advice I didn't ask for about school and girls and life in general. Things started getting weird when my mom basically invited Phillip to move in with us. I was 16, almost 17, and one day I got home from school and Phillip was moving boxes into my mom's room. They didn't even ask me. Like it just happened and I was supposed to be okay with it. And the worst part wasn't that Phillip was there. It was how everything changed after. My mom started making special dinners when Ethan and Lauren came to visit, buying things they liked, asking about their lives and jobs and plans, and with me it was like I barely existed. I'd get home from school and she wouldn't even ask how my day went. But if Ethan sent a message, she'd get all excited and start planning family activities that were basically for Phillip's family, not for me. They'd go out on weekends, go to dinner, go to the movies, and most of the time I wasn't even invited or found out after they'd already gone. I remember perfectly one day I had an important event at school, a presentation I'd worked on for weeks, and I told my mom with enough time so she could go. The day came, and she didn't show up. When I got home that night, she was preparing an elaborate dinner because Lauren was coming to introduce them to her new boyfriend. I asked her why she hadn't gone to my presentation, and she said, Oh, I forgot, but this thing with Lauren was important. That hurt more than I can explain. Like my own mom forgetting something of mine because she was busy with her boyfriend's daughter. And it wasn't the only time. It happened constantly. I'd be pushed to the background or directly invisible while she went all out to impress Philip's family. The tensions with Philip started rising when I was 17. He started acting like he was my dad or the owner of the house, telling me things like, "You have to get home at such time, you can't have friends over without permission, you need to help more with chores." And I'd tell him, "Look, Philip, this is my house. My dad left it to me. You don't have authority to tell me what to do." That infuriated him, and he'd run to my mom to complain that I was disrespectful and rebellious. My mom always took his side, told me I needed to be more understanding, that Philip was just trying to help, that I was being difficult on purpose. But the truth is, I was tired of this guy coming to the house. My dad left me and trying to control me while my mom looked the other way. One day we had a huge fight. Philip wanted to use one of the rooms as an office, and I told him no. That had been my dad's office, and I wasn't going to let him turn it into his space. He told me I was a selfish kid who didn't understand how families work. And I exploded, yelled at him that he wasn't my family, that he was my mom's boyfriend living in my property. My mom came in, and instead of calming the situation, she yelled at me that I was behaving horribly, that Philip was her partner and I had to respect him, and that if I couldn't do that, then maybe I needed to find another place to live. I froze. My own mom, basically threatening to kick me out of the house my dad had left me. The house that was legally mine, for defending a guy she'd known for less than 2 years. Things only got worse from there. Philip and I avoided each other, but when we crossed paths, there was pure tension. My mom was always in a bad mood, with me, criticizing everything I did, comparing me to Ethan and Lauren, who, according to her, were so mature and responsible. I spent my time locked in my room or at friends' houses because I couldn't stand the atmosphere. And then one day the breaking point came. I had a meeting with my dad's lawyer to review some property documents, legal stuff I had to sign now that I was of age, and Philip asked me what it was about. I told him it was private, matters regarding my dad's inheritance, and he got angry. He said if I was going to live in this house, I needed to be transparent with them about the money and properties. I told him it was none of his business, and he went straight to my mom. That night, my mom came into my room and told me she was fed up with my attitude, that Philip was part of this family now and I needed to accept it or leave. I reminded her the house was mine, and she said, "I don't care what a paper says. I'm your mother, and as long as you're a minor, you live under my rules." I told her that technically, I was the owner, and she was living on my property by my goodwill. That was the mistake. She went hysterical, started screaming that I was an ungrateful son, that she had raised me and sacrificed everything for me, that my dad had betrayed her by leaving her with nothing, and that if I couldn't be part of this family, then I needed to leave. Philip appeared at the door and said, "I think it's best you pack your things." My mom didn't stop him, didn't even contradict him, just looked at me with that disappointed face and said, "You have until tomorrow." I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what was happening. My mom was kicking me out of my own house, the house my dad left me, because her boyfriend of 2 years was uncomfortable with me. I called my paternal grandparents, Beatrice and Leonard, and told them everything. They were furious, told me to pack my things and come stay with them immediately, that they'd talk to lawyers about the situation. The next morning, I filled my car with everything I could, clothes, laptop, some things of my dad's that I had in my room, and I left. My mom didn't come out to say goodbye. Philip was in the kitchen drinking coffee like nothing, like mission accomplished. We got rid of the problem. Living with my grandparents was the best decision I could have made, even though it wasn't voluntary. They supported me emotionally, helped me finish high school, pushed me to apply to colleges, and constantly reminded me that the properties and money were mine by right. My mom would call me occasionally, but the conversations were cold, superficial. She'd ask how I was, and I'd say fine, and that's where everything died. She never apologized for kicking me out, never questioned if she'd done the right thing, just continued with her life with Philip as if I were a solved problem. During the next few years, I focused on college, studied business administration, thinking about the properties I was someday going to, actively manage, worked part-time, made my life. But always in the back was the anger that they were living in my house, using my things, probably renting out the other properties and keeping the money even though legally they had no right. After graduating a few months ago, I decided it was time to take control of what was mine. I talked to my dad's lawyer, who still managed the property affairs, and explained the situation to him. He confirmed that I was the legal owner of everything, that my mom had no rights over the properties or the money, and that if I wanted to reclaim the house, it was completely my decision. I started making plans to renovate the property and rent it out. I needed income to become completely independent and live on my own, and that empty or rented house was going to help me a lot financially. The problem was, it wasn't empty. My mom and Philip were still there living for free on my property. I waited for them to go on vacation. I found out through social media they were going to be away for 2 weeks visiting Philip's family in another state, so I hired a locksmith and changed all the locks on the house. I left a note on the door that said, "I need you to vacate the property. I'm giving you 2 weeks to get your things out. After that, I'll take legal action if necessary." I also sent them a text message explaining the same thing, and made it very clear this wasn't negotiable. The house was mine, and I needed to reclaim it for my plans. The calls started immediately. My mom hysterical saying how could I do this to them, that they had nowhere to go, that Philip had left his apartment years ago to move in with me, technically to move into my house, but whatever. Philip left me voicemails screaming that I was a spoiled brat, that he was going to sue me, that this was illegal. I responded calmly that I had every legal right to reclaim my property, that they'd been living there for free for years, and now I needed the house for my own plans. My mom, I tried to manipulate me emotionally, saying she was my mother. How could I leave her homeless, that my dad would be disappointed in me? That made me laugh because my dad had literally structured his will so I'd have everything and she'd have nothing. Clearly he knew exactly who she was. When they got back from their trip, they came to the house furious. They banged on the door like crazy, and I went out to talk to them but didn't let them in. Philip was red with rage, saying he was going to call the police, that I couldn't kick them out like that. I told him go ahead, call the police. I have all the documents that prove I'm the owner, and you're living here without my permission. My mom was crying, but they were tears of anger more than sadness, saying I had changed, that I wasn't the son she'd raised, that I was betraying her. I told her that she had kicked me out at 17 from this same house for a guy she'd barely known, so don't come now talking to me about betrayal. That's when she dropped the emotional bomb. She said Lauren was pregnant, that she was 19 years old and had just found out she was expecting a baby, and that if I kept the house, she wasn't going to have a stable place to live with her family. How could I be so cruel to throw a pregnant girl and her family out on the street? I told her Lauren didn't even live in the house, that the last I knew she had her own apartment, and that her situation wasn't my responsibility. My mom said Lauren had lost her job and her boyfriend had left her, that she was going to have to move back with her dad and stepmom, meaning my mom, and that I was destroying that girl's chance to have a safe home. Philip added that if I had any decency, I'd let them stay at least until Lauren had the baby. I told them no, that they had 2 weeks, as I said originally. My mom looked at me like I was a monster and said, "You're going to have to live with this on your conscience, the day that girl is living on the street with a newborn baby." Philip said, "You're just like your dad, a selfish person who only thinks about money," and they left. I thought that's where everything would end, but oh no, that was just the beginning of hell. Everyone started calling me. Everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my mom's friends, people I didn't even know had my number, all telling me I was a monster. How could I kick them out like that? That family comes first, that my mom raised me alone, Lee. My dad was there until he died, and I owed her everything. An aunt sent me like 15 messages saying I was heartless, that kicking out a pregnant girl was the lowest thing anyone could do, that I'd regret it my whole life. A cousin told me, "I hope you never need help from the family, because no one's going to be there for you after this." My mom had clearly told her version of the story, where I was the cruel villain kicking out my poor mother and an innocent pregnant girl out of pure selfishness. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody wanted to hear that. My mom had kicked me out first, that they'd been living for free on my property for years, that I had every legal right to reclaim what was mine. They just assumed I was wrong because my mom cried prettily, and there was a pregnant girl in the equation. The pressure was unbearable. Messages all day, calls I didn't answer, indirect posts on social media about ungrateful children and family that stabs you in the back. My grandparents supported me, telling me to ignore it, that all those people didn't know the truth, but it was still hard not to feel the guilt trying to get into my head. The 2 weeks passed, and obviously they hadn't left. I went to the house again, this time with my grandfather Leonard as a witness, and knocked on the door. My mom opened, and behind her were Philip, Lauren, with a barely visible belly, Ethan, and like 3 other people I didn't know but assumed were Philip's family. They all looked at me like I was the worst. My mom said out loud so everyone could hear, "My son has come to kick us out today, despite us begging for more time, despite Lauren needing stability for her baby." One of the women I didn't know said, "How can you do this to your own mother?" And I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I told them they'd already had 2 weeks, that I needed them to leave the property or I was going to have to proceed legally. Philip stepped forward and said, "You don't have the guts to sue us. You know the scandal this is going to cause in the family." I told him that if necessary, yes, I was going to proceed legally, because this was my property and I had plans for it. My mom started crying, saying, "Please, Owen, we just need a little more time, 1 more month, give Lauren a chance to get organized." I told her no, that I'd already given them enough time and they had chosen not to use it productively. Lauren started crying too, saying she had nothing to do with this. Why was I punishing her? I told her I wasn't punishing her. I was simply reclaiming my property and that her situation didn't change the fact that they had no right to be there. Everyone started talking at once, screaming that I was a monster, that my dad would be ashamed of me, that I was never going to have peace knowing what I did to them. My grandfather Leonard got between them and me and said firmly, "The boy has been more than patient. Samuel left this property for Owen, and you've abused his hospitality for years. It's time to leave." Philip told him to shut up, that this was between family, and Leonard said, "I'm more family to Owen than you, so shut your mouth." The tension was so high I thought there were going to be punches. I took a deep breath and said, "You have until Friday to get everything out. After that, I'm going to proceed with legal eviction." And I left. Friday came, and surprisingly, they started taking things out. Not everything, but at least they were making the effort. Over the next few days, they kept moving their belongings. My mom didn't talk to me. I just looked at me with hatred every time I passed by to check the progress. Philip muttered things I couldn't quite hear, but clearly weren't nice. Lauren was there helping pack, wiping away tears every so often, very dramatic, all to make me feel guilty, I suppose. Ethan was the only one who seemed neutral, just doing his job of moving boxes without the emotional theater of the others. It took them like an extra week to get everything completely out. When they finally left, my mom told me this is unforgivable. Don't expect me to ever talk to you again. I told her that was fine, that she'd made it very clear years ago that her new family was more important than me anyway. She left without saying more. Philip didn't say anything, just gave me a death stare and got in the car. And like that, after years, I finally got back the house. My dad left me. The messages from the family kept coming for weeks. How did I sleep at night knowing what I'd done? That Lauren had to go live at a friend's, a house in a tiny room, that my mom and Philip were in a cheap apartment, and it was all my fault. I stopped answering them. Blocked most of them. The ones who insisted on calling me, I'd tell them, if you care so much, help them yourselves, give them money, offer them your house. But don't ask me to sacrifice my property for people who treated me like garbage when they needed me. That shut them up quick, because obviously none of them were willing to make real sacrifices, they just wanted me to do it. Now, I'm working on renovating the house. Already hired people to fix some things that were neglected. Paint, update the kitchen. The plan is to rent it out at a good price. Use that income to become completely independent and eventually do the same with the other 2 properties that are also mine. My grandparents are proud of me. They say my dad would be happy to see me take control of my inheritance and use it to build my future. My mom hasn't talked to me again, which honestly is more of a relief than anything else. Philip probably hates me, and the truth is, I don't care. That guy was never anything to me anyway. Lauren had her baby recently, according to what I heard. A girl. And supposedly they're fine, so all that emotional pressure about the pregnant girl on the street turned out to be pure drama to manipulate me. Do I feel bad? Sometimes, yes. I'm not going to lie. There are moments where I think about how I could have handled things differently, if I should have given them more time, if I'm really a bad son for kicking out my mom. But then I remember how she kicked me out when I was 17. How she made me feel invisible in my own house for years. How she chose Phillip over me constantly. And the guilt goes away. This property is mine. My dad left it to me for his reasons, and I don't owe anything to people who treated me like a nuisance. Family isn't just blood, it's also respect and loyalty. And they showed me they had neither of those things toward me. So yes, I got my house back, kicked out my mom and her new family, and they're probably going to hate me forever. But at least now I have control over what my dad worked so hard to leave me. And that's more than I had a few months ago when they were still living there for free while I was paying rent somewhere else.